let's all start. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, wherever you guys are. Welcome to the SIL Manual webinar for today. We have collected some questions, not too many because the subject is quite unique, but we will answer those at the end of the webinar. You can post questions throughout the webinar using the question and answer box that you have available. Let me first introduce Tino. Tino, we can launch the presentation in the meantime. Tino, for those of you who have not met him yet, let me do one thing first. Let me ask for remote control. Here we go. Tino has over 30 years of experience. I got control, let's see.
You have control, yeah.
Yes, here we go. And here we have a nice picture of Tino and myself. So Tino, as I was saying, has 30 years of experience in the process industry. He's a senior functional safety expert and trainer under the SIS program for TÜV Rheinland. He has published several papers. He's done many courses for GMI and for other organizations throughout the world. And, he's the most expert that I know in functional safety. So he's very qualified today to talk about. And in fact, he's a co-author of the book that we're going to talk about today. I will only take, a few minutes to introduce GMI. It's a must for us. Let me see if I can get to the right slide here. Tino, do you mind moving the, okay, here we go. Okay, so what is GMI? GMI is an international company designing, manufacturing, engineering intrinsically safe and SIL interfaces. We use in automation packages such as DCS, fire and gas, HIPs, SCADAs, in all the industries, from oil and gas to pharma, food and bev. And we have over 40 years of experience. And we're very proud to design, engineer, and manufacture 100% of our product here in our facility near Milan, Italy. We are, on the other hand, a global player. Okay, finally I can manage it. So because we make safety product, we take special care in making those products, because for a better product, for a better world. A safer world is a better world for us all. So for example, we have complete traceability of a product. If 10 years from now, you give us a serial number of a product you bought, we can tell you the complete history of the product. From the components that were used to make it, to the people who tested it, and the test result. Of course, we are also SC3 compliant as a company, which means in our processes, our engineering is up to SIL3 compliant. Maybe Tino later can give you a little bit of introduction what that means. These are the products we manufacture. So IS barriers, safety relays, isolators, also SIL certified, and power supply, which are also up to SIL3 certified. We have multiplexers, we have termination boards, HART multiplexer, SPDs or surge protection devices, some loop indicators, and a division that provides functional safety services and training, which today is a bit on hold given this COVID. Last year, Tino, we did about 15 courses, right?
Correct.
And this year we've done 1 or 2, but we'll be back at it, right? Yeah, let's hope so. These are, as I said, we are a global company. So we have direct presence in 8 subsidiaries. As a matter of fact, last week, well, actually, at the beginning of this week, we have decided and started an office in Australia. So a new operation in Melbourne, Australia. We have over 80 distributors. We are about 200 people. We have run, as we said earlier, many courses, and we have thousands of installations. And these are some of our customers. We interface with most of the DCS, ESD packages vendor, from ABB to Yokogawa, on many projects globally with all the EPCs and many OEMs we supply to, from Siemens gas turbo machinery to Carrig, drilling equipment, and so on. And we are the AVL of many end user companies, oil and gas and petrochemical. Oh, I took very fast this time. I've been doing this for a while. So, okay, guys. So before I let Tino talk about our SIL manual, remind you once again, you can pose any question like, of course, relating to our subject. Let's not talk about tonight's dinner or the weather because, you know, at a different time. But let's see if I can release my control so you can take control of the my remote control. Here we go.
Okay.
Finally, okay, so I can, so just use the question and answer box to pose any question. Tino, all yours.
Paulo, thank you for the introduction. Thank you, GMI, for the opportunity to do another webinar like we have done several before. Today's webinar is about the GMI SIL Manual, or the SIS Manual 4th edition. That's actually the book, like it looks like. Maybe some of you have a copy. Later on the webinar, I will give you a link where you can, if you request a copy, that were many questions coming in during registrations. Where can I buy? Where can I get? Well, I will come to this later on. That's physically how the book looks like. And today, as you can see here on the right bottom corner in this blue bottom here, we have the 4th edition. I came in contact with the book in the 1st edition. It was out. Many of my international travel engineers, they were referring to a yellow safety book. Well, it's still that book they were mentioning over here. I think it's fair to say that today there are more than 50,000 copies that are out there in the industry. What is the manual all about? Well, the manual has nothing to do to promote, let's say, the products of GMI. The manual is mainly a practical guidance to help the people to understand that are coming in contact with the terminology, with the definitions, with the safety instrumented system. And the book itself, as you will see in a minute, I've got somewhere the founder of GMI, which is the father of Paulo, which you just heard talking. And the founder is called Glicente, and Glicente told me that the book is there to help the engineers who are not safety specialists, who are not reliability specialists. So in other words, they were trying to have a practical approach on how you can use those standards or how you can understand those standards without trying to rewrite the standard, without trying to explain things different than the standard is doing. But it was quite a challenge to keep it practical. Are the standards alone enough? That says the last bullet over here. Well, the answer depends, of course, on your know-how. Many people have gone through training courses, have read some other books, so many of you have a certain know-how already. And it will all depend on what is your competency yourself in those topics to read or use the book, yes or no. The first bullet over here, that's Glicente. He is the founder of the company called GMI. He was the original founder of the company called Elcon.
And
the second,
you know, he gives you, I have to bring him his regard, you know, he says, hello, Tino.
Oh, yes, you should do that. Maybe on one of the next webinars, we could maybe have him in for a few seconds.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
The second one over here,
vacation right now.
Yeah, the second one is called Basilio, Head of Development and Quality Assurance. And as Paulo was saying, I'm the co-author. And here the title is maybe looking a lot longer than those, but there is a reason for that, not for a title, but purely, I wanted to highlight here that I'm the co-author only for chapter 7 and only for chapter 8. There are 9 chapters in the book. I will do a rundown through all the chapters. I made a very, let's call it executive summary, just to tell the people that are interested what is inside the book. And on chapter 7, you will see the 6.15.11 edition 2. And on chapter 8, you will see the safety requirement specification, I think which was one of the webinars we have done last week.
Okay.
The content itself, that's here the complete content. As you see here, chapter 1, that's more like the introduction to the standards. What is out there in the market? What type of standards do we have? Because besides the IEC functional safety standard, we have many different application standard. And I think I have mentioned a few of them also in one of the chapter 1 slides coming up. In chapter number 2, it's more for the people who are totally new, not understanding what are we trying to prevent us from, or what are we trying to protect us from. And here we will talk about what are now prevention versus mitigation layers. And in that chapter, it is more like a concept. We will explain you what is a hazard, what is a hazard analysis, what techniques can you use for that. One of them that you will may recognize in the name of HAZOP. You will say, oh yeah, we have seen in our company also HAZOP. Then we will talk about LOPA. There are all kind of different techniques which we'll explain here in the chapter number 3. And then in chapter number 4, we will more try to go in depth into what type of analysis techniques can we use to try to understand in accidents what is happening in terms of consequences. And there we have given an example in the book. We're using a chemical substance which has been released, and there they will give you some a few, let's say, potential examples which you may recognize from in your own industry or in your own application. Chapter number 5 is highlighting the definition of a safety instrumented system, which is a combination of inputs with logic solvers in the middle and with final elements, mainly being an on-off valve or maybe some MCC motor starting or stopping a motor. Chapter 6 is a 61508 edition 2, the fundamental concepts, the framework will be explained. In chapter 7, that's where I came in and I explained edition number 2, which is mainly the topic was when I wrote that chapter. I actually wrote the chapter when the edition 2 was not being released. So I wrote it based on a draft. It was actually a good news for us, for GMI, because there I was using the correct information. I will show you later when the edition 2 was released. At the beginning it was released, they actually released an old draft from the working group, which was of course not the purpose. And then here in chapter number 8, I have made a safety requirement specification 1 safety loop, which is called safety intermittent function. In here, I will explain per 26 items what should be, or what shall be described and what shall be included in your description. And last but not least is a functional safety manual. Out of memory, I think next week we are doing a other webinar which is dedicated to functional safety manual, because there are 2 types of manuals which I would like to highlight. And I see that Paolo turned off the camera. I still hope he's...
But I'm here, I'm not going anywhere.
Right. What I want to ask here as a poll question, Paolo, is of those audience which is listening into this webinar, who of you have a copy of the 1st edition, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th edition, or none of the above? And my interest would go, what is your latest edition that you own with you?
Well, it looks like you guys have understood the question and you answer. And I see a lot of none of the above. That's not good. We got to find a way to get a book out to you. As Tino has mentioned, we have printed more than 50,000 copies in the different editions, and we have distributed all of them around the globe through our webinars, our seminars, exhibitions, meetings, requests, online requests. Okay, I think that's the end of it.
Yeah.
It's in the poll. So you can see, Tino, that we have 70% of the people that are listening to us don't have a copy of the book. Well, you guys, I don't know if it shows up. This is the book. I'm sure we get a copy out to you.
Sure.
Anna, we'll ask Anna, all the people that registered today, get a free copy of the book. How about that?
That's a very nice gesture.
And you guys, if you register, you have to have given the full address, otherwise you cannot ship it to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Close that. Okay, so
this.
Now, starting off,
yeah, voila.
Can we stop the poll?
Yeah, stop. It's stop. And if you still see it, it's because you have to close your.
Okay, now it's gone. Thank you. So, as I already mentioned, chapter 1 is more like a very, let's say, brief introduction to a history of standards. Standards are mainly made by lessons learned of previous accidents or incidents. In other words, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. When we learn something that happened in the past, try to prevent that by trying to make the people more aware that this could happen in the first place. And secondly, we will give them some guidance in the standards, or you will find some guidance that how and what to follow in able to try to prevent such incidents or accidents happening again. So the 1508 itself, or the 61508, that's a functional safety standard for anything with an electrical signal, anything with an electrical component or an electronic component, or programmable electronic safety related system. That's the abbreviation here, the EEPES. That's mainly for the manufacturers. That is not for the end users. That's purely for the manufacturers to prove that their equipment, devices, or material has been designed as per the latest edition here of this standard. Any end user listening into here, or any EPC contractor, or any operating company, well, The 61511, that's an application dedicated standard for the process industry. Process meaning chemical, petrochemical, oil and gas, food and beverage, and also pharmaceutical. These were the two new ones added in 2016 by edition 2. And other standards, too many to mention, but you can see here lots of numbers. The old HSE standard from 1987, the old DIN 9250 from 94. There we had the CCPS, American Institute of Chemical Engineers, were bringing out a guidelines for safety automation and chemical processes in 1993. Then you had in the US, you had the ISA 8401 and 96 released, was the first life cycle concept that was released. Of course, you have the APIs standards, you have the NFPA standards, etc., etc. In chapter 2, as I mentioned before, I think chapter 2 will be a very good introduction for people new in the industry. And everyone needs to learn from somehow, meaning that if you would use chapter 2, you will see we will talk about introduction. What is a hazard? What can happen when a hazard will escape? That is when your product actually is released, put it simple way. Then we'll look at two items, how frequent this can happen, and also what could be the consequence that will lead us into a risk. And then the whole story will be around risk reduction. When you hear functional safety, you hear a SIL class. A SIL class is nothing more than a performance band providing you with a specific risk reduction. Process control layers, we have seen in the older days, we used to call this distributed control, that's DCS systems. Today in the modern society or engineers, they call it the BPCS, meaning the same thing. It's a basic process control system. You're trying to measure your process values, you try to control it, and you try to regulate your control valves that you reach a certain level, flow, pressure, etc., etc. Now, when that layer goes wrong, which often it can be the case that that layer goes wrong for whatever reason, we need to actually alert, alarm, or monitor those type of items. That's the important things, or the importance is here is how you will take credit for an alarm coming to an operator. That's the first question. And the second thing is, even when the alarm is there or not there, or even when the operator makes a mistake or he didn't hear the alarm, or maybe he didn't take the correct action, we need to have a layer that is is independent and is separate from anything else. And that layer is called the ESD layer. And the IEC 61511, actually the book from GMI, it's all about that layer here called the SIS. It needs to have a certain architecture, needs to be independent, needs to be separate, etc., etc. And then too many to mention, but you have all the kind of physical protection layers, can be mitigation, prevention layers. And the last but not least here, evacuation is always a mitigation layer. In chapter 3, that is more for the people that are a little bit more advanced in the sense of you will try to understand, you may get some documentation from your vendor, you may get a functional safety data sheet, or you may get some reports, you may get some numbers, and you will see all kinds of abbreviations. Some of them will be maybe clear for some people that have heard this before, but here you will see the MTTF, the mean time to fail, the mean time between fail, that's the MTBF, the mean time to restoration, used to be called the mean time to repair in the older edition 1, but since 2010 they changed that in the 61508 edition 2.
So Dino, just interrupt you 1 second. So in our book, we mentioned mean time to restoration or mean time to repair?
It's still the mean time to repair, as chapter 3 was written before the edition 2 of the 61508 was out. So this is still...
So a new edition we have to work on, huh?
There is some room for some improvement, but as always, Paulo, you know that the standards, they have a lifetime between 5 to 10 years, so they keep on changing items. And yes, in that topic also here, chapter 3, there is some room for improvement, to say it in a gentle way. We don't want to rewrite the complete chapter, of course, but there is some room for improvement. So,
okay.
Because otherwise Paulo will say, Tino, rewrite chapter 3, which actually we could think about it. But anyway, the risk reduction.
Next edition. The next year, or maybe this year. We got a lot of time on our end this year.
The 5th edition. So we have the risk reduction factor, that's the RRF, which is in line, of course, with your probability to fail dangers upon demand. And here we say really, it's the ambiguity here on the term availability. Because that is a bit of the struggle in the industry today, that many people use numbers, not knowing where the numbers come from, and they start to believe or even trusting it. And that's, of course, not really a good opinion to use in a safety, to assume that the number will be correct. Failure rates, that's the famous lambda, the butt-up curve. You may have heard about the butt-up curve. Beginning when you start up, you have your infant mortality, then you have the constant failure, and you always go to a certain wear out where your equipment will stop working. Common causes explained in there. And then there's a whole story on safety analysis on how to model your SIL levels. In the book, even they talk about reliability block diagrams. We call that the RBDs. The FTA is called the fault tree analysis, and there is even an explanation. And I apologize, I forgot to close the brackets over here, but the Markov diagrams is the last topic discussed in the book. Chapter 4 is still continuing on chapter 2, where he talked about the hazard analysis. In this book here, in chapter 4, they talk more about the consequence analysis, and they give you a event tree analysis. Event tree analysis is a technique which starts from the given event, and it will analyze what type of consequences will have, and there we come in with the frequencies of this consequence. So event tree, for those experts maybe listening into this webinar, event tree is actually the basis for any LOPA that you may have used already in your projects. In that book here, chapter 4, they go on consequence analysis, and they will talk about all this type of fires. And I'm pretty sure some of you that are familiar to that will recognize most of them here: the pool fire, jet fire, flash fire, fireball, the bleef, as we call that. That's the boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion. So imagine you have a liquid tank. You start to heat up from outside the tank. Of course, the pressure will start to increase, and it will actually rupture until you have a very huge fireball. That's here the bleef that they are explaining. Explosion effects, vapor cloud explosion, physical explosion. Those are all kind of different analysis which you will see when you start to study what could be the analysis of the consequences of the initial hazard happening. And last but not least, there is also a part in chapter 4 talking about the dispersion modeling. And now we are moving in more for the technical engineers, technical in the sense of instrumentation slash hardware engineering, or maybe programming of a safety PLC. That is more your chapter here, chapter 5. And here we will introduce you the safety instrumented function. We will link that to a risk reduction factor. We will talk about the application for a SIS, meaning could be an ESD, emergency shutdown, could be BMS, could be fire and gas, etc. Safety requirements. I actually recognize when I made that summary here that even chapter 5 is already mentioning the safety requirements, right? But the safety requirement chapter which I wrote is dedicated for an end user, for a process industry. Whereas this safety requirement topic here handled in chapter 5, it's more like a generic definition of what should be defined as a safety requirement. Then we have the average probability of failure on demand. That's the PFD with the SIL levels. Different system architectures. And I saw in the registration, there was someone talking about a voting degradation. Well, clearly in your safety instrumented system, mainly in your safety requirement specification, that is where you will have to write down for the end user or for the instrument engineer or the maintenance engineer. If you have a 2 out of 3, how do you degrade to a 1 out of 2? What do you have to consider? And how will you compensate? And compensation is a definition coming from the edition 2 from the 6.15.11. Bypassing for stroke of testing of valves, partial stroke test, full stroke test, and the conceptual design. Very briefly, 6.15.08, well, that's the standard. It was functional safety, as you can see on the title here in the blue text. It's a general requirements, which is mentioned here. If you look on the top right corner, you see here 6.15.08-1 or minus sign 1. 1 means part number 1. And part number 1 came out in April 2010. That's the 04/2010. And you will see the complete standard has now today 7 parts. Part 1, 2, 3, 4 bold means normative. Part 5, 6, 7 means informative. In a nutshell, part 1 gives you the framework, the function safety management will give you the generic or general requirements that you will have to fulfill. Part 2 is mainly for the hardware designers inside the manufacturer's development team, and part 3 is for the firmware/software designers, if there is software, of course, on the device. And part 4 is nothing more than definition and examples. Part 6 is an example on how to calculate and determine your SIL levels. So that was part 5, apologies. So that was part 5. Part 6 are the guidelines on how to use the hardware, part 2, and the software, part 3. And part 7 are the techniques and measures. And Paolo mentioned there in the company introduction that they are SC3 compliance. That means GMI company had to prove that the quality and the rigorousness of their design of hardware and software is to part 7 of the 61508. And when they fulfill the column for SIL 3, then they get the award, or let's say the certification will be mentioning SC3, and that's here based on part number 7. As you can see, part 5, 6, 7 is informative, but part 1, 2, 3, 4 is normative.
Why don't you, Tino, give a little better explanation of the difference between a normative part and an informative part? I mean, it's very clear by the name, you know, normative, but
when a client,
I get this question, you know.
Okay, when a manufacturer like GMI makes a statement that they comply to the 61508, as a minimum, they need to prove that they comply entirely to the complete part 1, 2, 3, and 4. And whoever is the accreditation officer or office that they are using to come to the statement on a paper called certificate, that the equipment complies, in this case it's here at TUV office, that they comply to a 61508 SIL X, SIL 1, 2, 3, whatever it is, well then that inspector's duty is to find out evidence that in the hardware and software development, in the film safety management from part 1, that on all the chapters from part 1, 2, 3, 4, GMI complies to. And able to do that, he will use an informative section to help him to judge that GMI has followed part 1, 2, 3, 4, and part 5, 6, 7 is informative. That means the development team inside GMI is using this as a guidance to help him to fulfill part 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's why we distinction here between normative section and informative. But from an inspection point of view, from a development point of view, they cannot say, let's just skip 5, 6, and 7. But they will use 5, 6, and 7 to prove evidence that they comply to part 1, 2, 3, and 4. And as I mentioned before, SC3 on the components, devices, or the material from GMI means they can prove in part 7 in all the different tables of the standard how to avoid and control the failures, that they fulfill the SIL 3 level, and that's why they got the SC3 as a statement on their certificate.
Very clear explanation, Tino. Thank you.
It's sometimes difficult to make it clear because for us it's all clear, but then until you hear yourself talking, and it helps when you film yourself and then you say, I should say it different. Anyway, I will skip this slide as it is just the let's say the complete fundamental concepts of the 61508, but I will not do that. I will jump to a poll question over here.
All right, so we have a new poll for you guys. Manufacturer of safety, so I think this is the right poll. So what's the question here, Tino? A manufacturer of a safety product that is compliant to IEC 61508 shall provide.
Yeah, actually,
an easy question for our guest here.
It's
third-party certificate, safety manual, SIL certificate, all of the above, none of the above. I see there is also some question. Let me see.
Yeah, we give a bit more time because in my explanation about normative and informative, if you listened well, you may have heard a few things which could maybe confuse you here in this poll question. So I did not know the poll was right after my explanation, but it's good to see.
Here, normative means a must. You must follow.
I would like to say I can see the number of people that are online. I would like to see a bit more, but there's more action coming in now, which is good.
Yeah. We want to see every one of you giving us an answer. Huh? So we're making sure you are alive and listening in.
Yeah, that you're not asleep yet, but we want you
Not
to
asleep yet.
to
Well,
click now, and you can only click one answer. You cannot click multiple.
yeah, it's a single choice. So you either get it right or you get it wrong. So we have about 75% of the people answer. Any more? No? Should I hand the poll?
Yes.
All right.
It's already
And polling, share the results. So what we have here? In honesty, I haven't looked at the answer correctly. Which is the correct answer, Tino?
The correct answer is here the second one, a safety manual explaining the product as per 61508 is a normative compliant requirement to the 61508.
So only 9% of the people got this answer right.
That's scary.
Well,
I think many of
this is what we're here. That's what you are here for, you know, to let us understand.
Correct. Okay, let me start with the first one, and the first one was a third-party certificate of the IEC 61508 compliance was only 4%, and you already thought like maybe that's a third-party certificate of compliance is a good thing to have. I'm not saying it's not good to have, but it's not a requirement from the IEC 61508. It's purely the manufacturers are using this, and typically they will go to a third-party independent authority, and they will make a statement on behalf of the vendor on a specific product that the product fulfills the 61508. But as I'm saying here, a manufacturer of a safety product is not obliged to provide you with a third-party certificate. He can make his own certificate, as some manufacturers do, and they can state our product is safe. Again, the IEC standard does not even know the name certificate. That's a whole different reason why on the market we have certificates. The second one, well, I had 9% correct here, which is not much, but for at least there's 9% of people out there, you were correct. The safety manual is a normative requirement. That means any manufacturer out there in the field cannot provide you with a product after April 2010 without giving you a safety manual explaining you the content from the 61508 requirements. And for that, we're going to have later on, I think next week or the week after, I forgot all the new dates.
Next week.
We're going to have a webinar dedicated, and I will highlight you a few items. What shall be the content, what shall be provided to you. Things in there
Safety
like,
manual was one of my battles, you know, since the very beginning. We had safety manual, but very few were out there in the market and
correct.
Trying to comply and trying to offer a product, and they're comparing, but there is no
many
base to compare.
Yeah. Personally, I'd rather have a safety manual than a certificate, because the certificate gives you just a SIL number.
Well, today, you know, a certification, it's at least in GMI case, is stating that you have a safety manual into which all the information that are, you know, the right information, and the safety manual becomes, I forgot the correct word.
It is an integral part of your certificate.
Yeah, there is a technical name for this, you know, it's basically a control document. It is a control document.
Control document, and some certificates will even say it's an integral part. That means it is part of the certificate. Anyway, the third question or the third answer was SIL certificate plus test report of the certificate. And here I only have 17%. Well, I can tell you again, that's not a requirement from a standard. You are allowed to do that, but it's not a must in able to comply. All of the above, well, because of all the other reasons, it was not correct. And luckily, none of you took none of the above. So
there is a question about how can you know, manufacturers self-certify or not get a third-party certificate. Is it mandated? Is it mandated to have a third-party certificate? We said no.
It is not mandated.
We need to have some kind of you know, independent assessment.
Well, Paulo, you know, to be quite frankly here and open in this webinar, to be neutral also, but the certification is used between the competition to say, I have this size of paper and I have this color of logo. What does the other one have? And basically the certification is driven to sell the products, not by the standard reasons, but it is purely to show that another person, another company can make a statement about the quality. And I think it's a good point to have. I'm not saying it's not good to have, but it's not a requirement, as Paulo just said, it's not mandatory from the standards. Right.
But you can, but I guess the question is, how can you self-assess? You cannot self-assess, you cannot self-certify yourself, but you can, you have different teams.
You have a good point, Paolo. As per reasons for the 61508 requirement, a SIL 3 cannot make a self-assessment from the same company. It has to be from a third party or a different organization. So a SIL 1 is from a different person, a SIL 2 is from a different department, can be in the same company, and you can make self-declaration that you comply to SIL 1 and SIL 2. But for a SIL 3, as per 61508, that's
you need an independent.
Shall be assessed, and that is where the independent bodies are coming in. But
of course, that does not mean you get a certificate. You might get an assessment.
Exactly. So that's maybe the back door for a SIL 3. Right, to finish off, I'm looking at the time, to finish off the rest of the chapters, chapter 7, 15, 11. Again, part 1 is bold, that means that's the normative part. Part 2 and 3 is the informative part. That's for any operating company, any end user in the process industry. If you want to build a functional safety, let's say, working or quality SIS system, well, then you better start to read and try to understand the 6, 15, 11. And I threw in here a picture which is called the life cycle. And I think in 2 days from now, so it's on Thursday, we're going to have a IEC 6, 15, 11 life cycle. So there I will explain more in detail what the life cycle is all about. But basically here, the framework is the same as with the edition 1. So this is here purely edition 2 in chapter 7 described, but it's the same framework as with the edition number 1. With one small difference here, number 13 in box number 4, that's your FAT is now a normative requirement by edition 2, which was informative, strangely enough, in edition number 1. Lifecycle overview in relation to all the clauses, that's the normative section. And it will be an executive summary giving phase per phase, as will be repeated on Thursday during our webinar. And we're coming to the end of the book. Chapter 8 is the second last chapter, that's the SRS. Again, here I did not put too much text in there. Basically, we are saying here the content of the SRS will be depending, of course, on the previous life cycle. Maybe do one step back. If you look here, phase number 3, that's your safety requirement specification. And of course, the inputs is coming here from the first 2 phases, which is your process hazard risk assessments, with or without LOPA, because many companies back here in Europe are refusing to do LOPA because they think it is too tricky on frequencies, on numbers, and they take more conservative approach. So you don't have to do LOPA. You can skip this one, depending on what is your risk criteria that you will use to define how much risk reduction do you need. And the SRS here in phase number 3, that is what we will explain here with a practical example, what I have done. Being an engineer myself from the older days, I was trying to think, what would I like to describe on the requirement of those 29 items? And last but not least, application program SRS is a very short section in chapter 8 of the book. What has changed here? It used to be called software programming safety PLC. When you are programming a safety PLC, you call it software. We now call this application programming. They will talk about the life cycle, which will be a V model, etc., etc. And last but not least, and again, I didn't put too much text because I'm saving my text, or let's say my content, for the webinar of next week. That's the functional safety manual. Now in the book of GMI, and that is why I made the webinar, because the book of GMI is only talking about the safety manual in relation to the manufacturer, to the 61508. The safety manual or the functional safety manual that I will talk about in the webinar is both. It's this one plus the new requirement from edition 2 of the 61511, which means 2016 release, is now requiring to have a functional safety manual on system application level. And that's a whole different story, but I will save that for the webinar.
Oh, right. We have another question. Before we go to this poll, which I'll launch in a second, I want to mention that I was instrumental to get your chapter 8, Tino, to write chapter 8. Do you remember that?
Correct.
On safety requirement specification, because guys, we're a vendor, and so often we don't get the complete specification to provide product. You just say, I want a SIL beta, I want a SIL 3 relay, period. Not enough information. Okay, here's a let's see. This is good for us, you know, to know what you like, what you guys like. And as I promised today, I just made up this promise. I will send you a hard copy anyhow, providing you are giving us your address. Okay.
Well, it's good because the majority, they all prefer an ebook.
Yeah, everybody wants an ebook. Okay, no problem. Ebook, it's very easy. You can log on to our website.
I got a slide coming, Paolo. I actually have this, but okay, you can.
Oh, okay.
But I got a slide.
I can stop this and you can go to it.
All right. Well, oops.
There we go.
That's what I was just mentioning. That's the link up here. That is where you can register. So the link will also be every webinar that GMI is doing. We are recording it as we are speaking. Will be available on the YouTube channel from GMI. Will also be somewhere promoted through our LinkedIn channels. Oops, through our LinkedIn channels. So once you register, you will have a page coming up, and you can require a ebook, or you can require, as Paolo was saying, with the address, you can require to have a hard copy being sent to your destination wherever you are.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I was just typing in the answer, but basically, guys, after the webinars, all the registrants will get an email from us thanking you and sharing the copy of the presentations, and you can reply to that email and say, I want my free copy, as Paolo promised, and you get, just make sure the address is there. All right, Tino, while, let's see, you have another slide?
No, I will stop sharing, and then it's back to you for the Q&A.
Okay, while I do that, while I do cancel, answer live, that's it, done. There is a couple of questions, you might want to look at it while I just look for the question and answer we prepared from the registration file.
Yes, I'm here.
Share screen.
Okay, so can I read the first question, Paolo, as you are looking?
Sure, you go ahead.
Okay, we have a question online from a person saying, my understanding is that there are different certificates when it comes to safety. Columns, so that means he or she is explaining, process of developing the product, hardware and software certificate, and another certificate for integrator doing the FAT, SAT. Well, as I'm trying to answer this live, I would say your understanding is correct. We have many different certifications, especially for safety. Now let us stick to the webinar topic, which is the SIS. So for a safety instrumented system, when you are buying devices, I personally would say try to find devices which are suitable, compatible to the 61508, and most likely the vendors will give you certificates stating that they are compliant to 61508. But your question was also relating to a system integrator for the FAT and SAT, or whatever you call it. I would say in that type of certification, what I would look for personally, if I would be the engineer on the project, I would seek if my system integrator is using functional safety management. That means, does he has a quality scheme in place as he is required to have by the standard? And some of those system integrators that I used to work with also have an independent certificate making a statement that they are executing their project as per the functional safety requirements from the standard. Right, Paolo, over to you.
Yeah, very good. That is exactly what the answer I think they were looking for. So these are some questions we received during the registration, and we put here in some couple of slides together. Let me show you the first one. You see it, right?
I see it, yes.
Good, so everybody sees it then.
Yeah, okay.
Need to get update on the SIL application and lifecycle concept. Okay, let's see the slide you prepared to answer that.
Yeah, I actually was a bit puzzled, a bit, not say confused, but I didn't really know really what the question was all about. So based on the nature of the question, and the person was apparently from an operating company, then you clearly need to become competent in the 61511 edition too. As you were asking, you need to know more about SIL and applications. Well, again, there are so many different applications, but as you are an operating company, and I thought that I recognized the name of your company, well, you are in the process industry. That means that you need to get more aware here of the 61511, and maybe some of the webinars can help you a little bit. But what I was saying in the second bullet here, the SIL application will depend on many factors such as, but not limited to, your operating company corporate risk allowance. That means that's not for you to decide that. Your corporate management will have to tell you what is a tolerable level in your production units, and that's a given fact by them. And based on whatever has done or whoever has done, or which department has done the investigation for the hazard and risk analysis, based on that outcome, you will need to decide how much SIL level risk reduction you may need. Once you know you need some more risk reduction, then your operating company can maybe have a safety requirement specification. That means you have maybe your own template, your own, let's say, way on how to describe your SRSs. They will explain in there what type of systems you are allowed to use. Maybe in some cases you will have to use hardwire logic or programmable logic or relay-based logic or whatever it is. There it will also be explained in your company what type of architectures are you allowed to use or not. So those are all kind of items. In a generic question as you ask, I cannot really more say as I just said. And then last thing, PS, or what I like to say here in closing, your SIL level is never relevant for any specific life cycle activity. I will try to rephrase that. Regardless if your aim will be for SIL 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is, that is irrelevant on how the life cycle support you will have to use. Back to you, Paulo.
Great. Thank you. Answer that question. We have some live questions, but let's first get to this question we have registered earlier. So, oops, I went too fast. Also, LOPA analysis and SFARP topics. SFARP, what does that mean?
So far as reasonable practical. We are engineers. We like to make it difficult. We like fight for everything in abbreviation.
All right. Let me see what you wrote on that.
Well,
so far as reasonable practical. Well, that is, I never read that before.
Well,
I know ALARP as low as reasonable practical.
Correct. And it's coming from ALARP. I mean, ALARP as low as reasonable practical. And for those who are maybe experts here listening into the webinar, I can say the ALARP is coming from the book from HSE from in the early 2000s, and they took it over in the edition 1 of the 6.15.11. So ALARP is a definition coming from the 6.15.11 definitions here in my slide, but initially it was coming from a book which is coming from the HSE, which is a guideline basically downloadable free of charge for those who would search it on the internet. Now, the first one, LOPA, Layers of Protection Analysis, and I mentioned here in full words, because some people do not maybe know what LOPA means. Basically, you will investigate, and I know I don't have to move my hands too quick on my virtual background, but those layers are layers on top of each other. And you will investigate how much protection does your production unit on the bottom get and how efficient those layers are. That is what LOPA is doing. And so far as reasonable practical, as the word is saying, you will try to dedicate or find out or answer yourself in investigation how far reasonable, acceptable can such a layer prevent or reduce my risk. Now, as I clearly stating here, please do not think that the GMI manual will help you to understand those topics specific, because even to be quite frankly, the IEC 6.15.08 and the IEC 6.15.11 will not give you very detailed explanation. My humble opinion, and I have to stay neutral here, is go out to a commercial book. And there are many very good commercial books available, specialized by teams of experts using those techniques as a daily activities, and staying neutral, but still I have to mention one word here. If you search for CCPS books, you will find many very good books, which were also my guidance when I was trying to learn this. And as we have here that slide, leave the slide here, Paulo, for a second. There was another question coming in live saying, if you skip LOPA, how do you define the safety requirement specification to reduce the risk? Well, that's a very simple answer. You don't use LOPA, you use a simple risk matrix or a risk graph to try to define what type of SIL level do I need. Of course, we all know that's an assumption. Do I need a SIL 1, a SIL 2, or a SIL 3 band? And what is good on this simple way to do it, many companies that I know, they refuse LOPA because LOPA, it's all numbers, it's all frequency numbers. And you give an engineer some, let's say, opportunity to manipulate numbers. And I'm pretty sure that many engineers will do that to fit the budget, to fit the requirements, or to please their boss. Well, that's not safety, that's engineering numbers. If you go conservative approach and you have a risk model from corporate level, and then they dedicate, they say, look, when you have this type of consequence, and still I agree with you, the frequencies are always doubtful, even the frequencies of the events. But assume that your team agrees on a certain frequency with a certain consequence, it will be stated to you what type of SIL level do you need. And when your risk matrix is calibrated correctly enough, when the team was agreeing with the corporate management, you would need a SIL 1, well, go for a SIL 2 on your risk matrix is a very good approach. And there you will skip your LOPA and not have to actually judge those numbers so accurate. Paulo, next slide, please.
Yeah, and as Tino has mentioned, don't take the book as, the Bible. It's just the guidelines, it's some introduction. We're trying to explain some terms. It was basically, I believe you mentioned it earlier, but the concept started from my dad was to the standard, it's pretty damn complicated. Let's try to make it a little simpler, but of course, you cannot avoid reading, the standard if you need to. Okay, next question, which fits in with the live question also, because SIL requirement for control of an on-off valve, and we have a question, live question that talks about if a body of a valve also needs, or any actuator needs to be SIL.
Yeah, actually, I got this live question. If you go with me to the next slide, Paulo, because I cannot remember what I answered. Okay, right.
Post it so everybody can read it.
Let's first talk about the control valve. A SIL control valve, I have never seen one. A control valve as SIL. A SIL on-off valve, I have seen many, and probably you also. So control for us, not misunderstood, or maybe I misunderstand your question, but the meaning of a SIL control valve, I don't really know what the question could tell me. So,
in honesty, Tino, I don't know about control valve, but we do have requests, and there are not many, but there are, when you look at the IO counts of several projects, they are requesting SIL rated analog output.
Correct.
Card, which analog output is driving a valve, a control valve. So
correct. But there you talk
must
about
be application for it.
You talk about the analog output. I mean, the majority, 90% of all safety loop, maybe 95% worldwide, is all working through a digital output signal.
But very few are there also. So there must be some application.
Yeah, you start, you stop, you open, you close. But for SIL control, as Paulo is saying, you need an analog output. And some safety PLC manufacturers, they will provide you with an analog output. That means that analog output needs to also be SIL compliant. And in that case, if your analog output would go to an I2P converter and you can try to control a valve with that, and you call this, that's a SIL control valve, I would really doubt going into your I2P control versus to your pneumatic signal to your control valve itself. How on earth will a manufacturer get the assembly for all of this SIL compliance? I would say, if you have an example, please do me a favor, send me evidence by email, and I'm always happy to look into the evidence with you. But I typically read between the lines. I'm not reading the text. I'm trying to find out why can I not believe or understand the text. So when you send me evidence, don't send me marketing. Send me something technically which I can understand as an engineer. Second bullet.
Be careful what you send in.
Well, I
don't like the answer.
I've done a webinar with a vendor, which I cannot mention here, and the webinar was explaining all his SIL valves, and I fully agree to what they explained. But there is also another story, which I also have here mentioned on the last bullet, okay? And I clearly say here, listen, and that is also the online question. If pneumatic valve is SIL 1, no, so SIL 2 or SIL 3 certified. Well, first mistake in your statement, a SIL device is never certified. A device will have a certificate in compliance too. But the valve on his own, when you put the valve in your workshop, how will you tell me what safety function this is if it's not installed with the product, etc.? So certified, I would say maybe compliance. Then it is also required SIL certification for the valve body. Well, tell me, how will I actually certify a valve body, talking about a ball valve, a gate valve, a butterfly, whatever valve you are using? And I know there are some statements out there in the market. And again, without going too much in detail, we will look at my last bullet now. The last bullet, there is a new specific standard in the make. That means it's ongoing. It's not released yet, as far as I understood, not released yet. And it's called Functional Safety of Safety-Related Automated Industrial Valves for, or it is coming from a technical committee, which is the CENELEC, the CEN-TC Technical Committee 69. And the objective will be to have safety valve assemblies, meaning the body, the actuator, the stem, whatever you are using to open or close a valve. Well, the objective of this new standard will be to make a statement that, knowing the rules of the 61508 and 61511 equivalent, that you can claim that you can achieve with the assembly a certain SIL level. The main reason for that is very simple. Too many manufacturers are struggling with that. And actually we're using accreditation officers, and those officers, or those, let's say, assessment engineers, were using part of the 61508, part of the 61511, part of a bit of mix of both. And they came to statements saying, well, that maybe that smart positioner is SIL X, or maybe the actuator is SIL X, but no one was really making, or not, no one is the wrong word, not the majority of all the valve assemblies could not use specific one certificate for the complete functionality. So what they were selling to you mainly was a piece of paper of one specific device, which most likely was correct what the statement was saying. But once you start to assemble the entire valve to carry out a safety function, that is typically where some of those certificates were actually misleading in misunderstanding on what is now the functionality of the valve reaching a certain SIL level. Yes, Paolo, coming to the next.
Well, yeah, I have a comment. I mean, it's like, you know, coming to the live question, how can you certify body? You know, we have requests when they say they want the SIL certificate for the cabling or for the terminal block. You know, for mechanicals, you know, if I read correctly the book, so the standard, you know, is a functional safety of electrical, electronic, programmable, electronic safety related system, not, you know, a valve body or a wire. But as you correctly mentioned, a valve consists of many parts, and we have to look at the complete package to know what you're trying to achieve. But let me also, you said something earlier that might have been misunderstood. Because we are a component manufacturer, we offer to our customer a certification. It's a piece of paper that says certificate in German. But what that means is that the product is compliant to a standard and is supposed to do a specific safety function. Of course, you correctly said it's not the product certified, it's the loop, the SIF, that needs to be certified.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, Paolo. We can certify the functionality from end to end, from sensor to final element. That we can certify and give it a SIL X. But you take your, let's say, your SIL 3 safety relay out of the equation, and your loop will not work anymore. That means it is an integral part of my loop functionality. In order to build a loop, to keep it easy, I will seek as an engineer, of course, all SIL compliant devices, because then my job is easy. But what do you do when you have all of a sudden a device in your loop which has nothing? No paper, no SIL, then you have to make a judgment. And how do you do that? And those are the challenges.
Yeah, the certificate is basically telling you that you are compliant to be used in a SIL loop according to certain, to do a certain function according to some, there's always some conditions attached to it. Okay, let's look at the next question.
Which is, I think, the last one by memory. But
it is the last one, and maybe there's another one. To improve more technically in order to support customer effectively. More than a question is
it's more well, actually, I left this in there. It's not really a question. It's more a statement, but I like it. So you can give me the next slide.
Yeah.
I'm saying, I said in the beginning of this webinar that's exactly what this book is supposed to be used for. We have absolutely no intention to replace any other written book that is out there on the market, which is maybe a lot more detailed. As Paulo was saying, his father's idea, Clicente's idea, was to help the engineers in a normal engineering language, trying to explain, let's say, if you would read the standard yourself, most likely you would never have the same impression as if you read the GMI book. So the GMI book is more an impression for the engineers trying to understand. And as this statement was made, this person who actually registered to listen to this webinar, and I hope he is online, or he or she is still online, actually that book intention is to help you to understand more of the buzzwords, more of the frameworks. You will be more aware after reading the book than you were maybe not aware before you started to read the book. So it's our intention to help you, to bring you more awareness and to help you to sound more professional and understanding it more professional when you are dealing with your customers.
It's the whole idea about publishing this book and making it available free of charge, you know, to make people more aware of what is out there, what you need to do, how to evaluate product. Okay, so you might be right. That was the last question we had registered. We have a slide on our webinars. We have a lot of webinars online, maybe too many, I start to think. But just go on our website and you can see what's coming up next. And it is, yeah, over an hour. So let me run the last poll. Let us know how we did today, how me and especially how Tino's been doing. So you can click in your answer. I made it a single choice, so there's no way for you to type twice. Okay, and what else is? Let me stop sharing so you guys see us a little bigger. Okay, well, I think everybody has voted and the poll, share the result. Good, thank you. Oops, what happened here? Ah, it's you, Tino. You started sharing something?
Sorry, did I take away the poll?
No, the poll is still here, but I don't know.
Fine. Yeah, because I am going to the closing section, which is the last two slides we typically show when we are closing, but I thought I was just preparing myself. Apologies, but
yeah, no problem. I'll do like this. I kick you out. How about that?
Okay, very good.
Okay, so the poll said, 80% said we did very good, but there was one guy who said not in line with the expectation. We're sorry about that. You know, it's we have many webinars on different subjects. This specifically was on our book, just to make you aware of it. And you can log into other webinars, maybe on functional. The next one is on, we have Tino is on functional safety manual, right? The importance of it.
Thursday, 6, 15, 11 lifecycle. That's
first we have lifecycle, okay. Earlier.
And next week we have a safety manual itself. But I would be interesting that the person, whoever has registered not in line with the expectation, they always like to do better. Maybe I need to think about how to explain 300 pages in 20 minutes, but fine. So send me why you think it was not in line and maybe we can do it the next time better.
Yeah, you will receive a mail with our contacts and you can write us a comment and we look forward to see you next time.
Can I go to the closing, Paulo, or not?
Yeah, go to the closing. You can close.
Well, I was trying to close, but you kicked me out.
Well, I mean,
all right. So that is the last slide. That's our email addresses. That's the contact details in there. That's, as Paulo was saying, thank you for staying over on the webinar. We didn't lose too many. That was always good. And I hope to see you soon again in one of the next ones.
Okay, great. Thank you again. Thank you, Tino, for being with us today. See you next time. Thank you, guys. Well, you are the one who can shut down. I cannot. So.
Okay. So
you're in control.
Let me go this, and then I will say, have a good evening, good morning, wherever you are, and keep it safe.
Keep it safe. Ciao.
Thank you. Bye. Ciao.